Hi and welcome to the Bruce channel. I'm Bruce and we were away last week, a bit too much on the plate. It's been a busy couple of weeks, hasn't it? I'm troubled. I believe that we, and I say we in two contexts, we as in the United States and we as a group of living beings on a planet known as Earth, I believe that we face an existential threat. The lunatics are running the asylum. So a couple of weeks ago, I said that a friend who had been planning on voting for the Orange Diva said, "What are you worried about? He'll have advisors." I said last time that he's repeatedly shown he doesn't listen to his advisors. He seems genuinely unable to hold on to a thought, follow a process of logical arguments. So I said that 2 weeks ago. Just days later, he fires Secretary of State Rex Tillerson. Now, I wasn't all that pleased when Rex Tillerson was named secretary. He had no diplomatic experience. And I thought he was a bad Secretary of State. He's gutting the place, not filling posts within the State Department. Morale is at an all-time low. But at the very least, he did conduct himself with dignity. He spoke in measured tones. He comported himself well, but he was ousted. Oh, and how was he ousted? The Orange Menace couldn't talk to him, couldn't write him. He just tweeted it out. Then at the end of the week, another craven display. He ordered Attorney General Jeff Sessions to fire the Deputy Director of the FBI 2 days before he was to retire. That's a puerile act. Purely a puerile act designed to deprive the guy of his pension after a long and distinguished career. Then just days ago, he fired from his post as National Security Advisor, 3-star General H.R. McMaster. He's been a voice of reason. He and Secretary of State James Mattis, a former Marine general, were together voices of reason. Men who know war are often the most determined to try and avoid it. But he's being replaced with the Hawk of Hawks, John Bolton. This is a man who, instead of going to Vietnam, joined the National Guard. He's admitted that he didn't want to die in a rice paddy, but he's perfectly okay with sending someone else to die in a rice paddy. Just a month ago, he called for the U.S. to launch a preemptive strike against North Korea. Oh, and you remember how little Donnie campaigned by saying he was always against the Iraq War? Bolton was for it then. He was one of the architects of it, and he's still for it. Heaven help us, we are in mortal peril. So if war doesn't get us in the short run, the climate may in the long. Spring arrived, did you notice? Not if you're in the Northeast, you didn't. Hit with their 4th nor'easter in 3 weeks, and this one apparently carried with it more snow than the previous 3, and it's a big, wet snow. Not untypical for March, but that heavy stuff knocks down tree branches, knocks down power lines. So almost 100,000 people without power, thousands and thousands of canceled flights. Now where I am, we were in part of the same storm. It was a huge storm, but it didn't do anything, really. It was snowing at dawn. By 10, there was maybe an inch of snow, and at that, only on the tree branches, fence posts, trash toter. Didn't stick on the roads. The temperatures didn't go that low, and by noon it was gone. All of it. Still, the kids liked it. School was canceled here. Meanwhile, California is getting hit now with tons of rain. Of course, they've had wildfires over the years, lots of bare ground. The ground doesn't have the protection of flora, so there are mudslides. And the rain is just ongoing. It's known as the Pineapple Express because it's huge, stretching from Hawaii to the West Coast. I encountered the strangest, it's not trivia, but really a surprising fact. So, all right, do you know who this is? That's John Tyler, he of Tippecanoe and Tyler, too, fame. William Henry Harrison and he ran for president and vice president. That was their campaign slogan. William Henry Harrison, of course, famously the president who served the shortest term ever, dying just a month after being sworn in. He developed pneumonia. He gave a 2-hour speech outside in the cold. It may have been raining, too. So John Tyler becomes the 10th president, only served out that term, left office in 1845. With me? Here's what makes it a story. John Tyler was born in 1790. That's 1 year after George Washington becomes the first president. John Tyler died in 1862. He was 71. The Civil War is going on. John Tyler's first wife died while they were in the White House. She'd been First Lady for only a year and a half. The two of them had 8 children. 2 years later, President Tyler remarried, and with his second wife, had 7 more children. The youngest of them, Lyon Tyler, was born in 1853. As it happens, Lyon's first wife died young. He too remarried. The woman he married the second time was 30 years his junior. He was 75 years old when his youngest son, Harrison Tyler, John Tyler's grandson, was born. Harrison Tyler was born in 1928. He's still alive at 89. He's got a brother who's a couple years older. John Tyler, the 10th president, has 2 living grandsons, 3 generations, just 1 year shorter than the entire history of the United States.
Hey, let me tell you about my book, Shrink. For most of my adult life, I weighed a little over 100 pounds. Not much more than in this picture taken when I was about 17 and considering becoming a jockey. But as is often true, once I crossed into my 40s, extra weight came and it stayed. For years I tried to lose, instead gained, and ended up 153 pounds. And I'm embarrassed to show you this video. Then I learned that it isn't about calories and exercise, but instead it's about what you eat. You might say, sure, ice cream makes you fat. But there were surprises, things like orange juice not being such a wise choice if you're trying to lose weight. So I just made some basic changes to what I ate, not how much, and the weight just fell off. Now, nearly 3 years later, it is still off. And don't misunderstand, I'm eating foods I like, not bamboo shoots. Friends ask me how I did it so often, I put it in a book. It's available as an ebook for all platforms, and the print edition is available at barnesandnoble.com and amazon.com. Hey, you can shrink too.
Welcome back. Remember, you can write to us at the Bruce Channel at yahoo.com. See all of our previous shows at tinyurl.com/Bruce Channel or our Facebook page. So, do you remember Chicken Little? The sky is falling. The sky is falling. Yeah. This is worse. Stories out of Miami a couple of weeks ago. I don't know if you saw a true story. A woman in Miami was in her bedroom, sitting on her bed, talking on the phone. Outside, up in the sky, not a bird or a plane, but a Royal Canadian Air Force helicopter. Now, yeah, I know, Canada's north, Miami's pretty far south. They were there for joint training maneuvers with their Yank counterparts. Somehow, a life raft, uninflated, but an inflatable life raft, separated from the chopper, weighs 80 pounds. Uninflated, doesn't have that much wind resistance, so it's an 80-pound rock. It hits the roof, goes right through the roof, just missing the woman talking on the phone. She had a few cuts, that's all, but she could have been killed. Chicken Little, indeed. All right, speaking about things up in the sky, what's with United Airlines? You know, once upon a time, they had a pretty decent reputation. Fly the friendly skies of United. And then they bought Rhapsody in Blue. They used that for their theme. Then they merged with Continental. It seems they have devolved. It's 11 months or so, but last spring, surely you remember, they had overbooked a flight and they forcibly dragged a physician off the plane. Now, that was parodied just a month later when James Comey was fired. The New Yorker's cover that week showed Comey being dragged off the plane by a man in uniform. Looks a lot like Jeff Sessions. And the pilot, by the way, looks as though his hair is orange. Anyway, so now they've got this thing with pets. Within just a relatively short span of time recently, United has been responsible for dogs dying. One dog traveling from Miami to San Francisco had a layover in Houston. Now, if that happens, they're supposed to put the animals in a climate-controlled area, but they didn't. 45 minutes on the tarmac, and it was 95 degrees in the shade. No telling what it was on the tarmac, but the dog died. And on another flight, the flight attendant, small dog, told the passenger to put the dog in the overhead compartment. 3.5 hours. Well, the dog barked and barked and barked for 2 hours. Can you imagine? Why am I here? Where is everyone? All I hear is this roar, and doesn't understand the roar of a jet engine. It's just a roar. And it's dark. Got no idea why it's being punished. Bark, 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 bark. Bark, 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 bark. And it's, if not airtight, it's pretty tight, suffocated, ran out of air. Also, they recently shipped the dog to Japan. It's supposed to go to Kansas. Friendly skies? Imagine, what if they weren't friendly? All right, you know how when you're online, some sites have pop-up ads? Well, there's one that advertises a membership. All right, that's not so unusual, right? Well, this popped up and I clicked. You can join MeUndies, really. MeUndies. There are 3 plans to choose from, really. They'll ship you underwear every month, really. I did click. I learned they had three plans. I pretty much lost interest after that. But who thinks this stuff up? There's a zillion ways to make money online. I guess someone's always trying to think up a new one. But are you familiar with Open Table? It's an app, I guess. It's used to make restaurant reservations. Really? I need an app for that? Hello, it's Bruce. I can make a reservation. I only learned of this because it made the news. Open Table fired an employee in Chicago. They were right to fire the employee. There's apparently a competing company, Reserve. The Open Table employee made hundreds of reservations using Reserve. And so the restaurants had hundreds of no-shows. Apparently thinking that, okay, if Reserve proves to be unreliable, those restaurants may choose to switch to Open Table. So here's my question. If they compete, if I'm using Open Table, am I getting excluded from those restaurants that use Reserve? Vice versa? Call and make your own. So Toys R Us declared bankruptcy and will close its US and UK stores. On the heels of that, 2 other stories came out. Charles Lazarus founded Toys R Us, 1948. He was 25, and he figured, hey, lots of babies. They weren't known as the baby boomers yet, but he figured there would be a demand for lots of toys, and he was right. He was CEO until 1994. Days after the bankruptcy and the store closings were just announced, he died on Thursday, just days later. Then one other story came out even later than that. Some billionaire and some of his buddies are going to try and save maybe 400 of the stores. Stay tuned. Another company had fallen on hard times. Domino's Pizza, which really started the home delivery thing that most everyone does now. They had become a joke. But you know the commercial a couple of years ago, they started talking about their poor quality and said they were going to fix it. In a recent poll, more people said Domino's had become their favorite than any other chain. So turnarounds can happen. I just watched a wonderful conversation, not quite an interview. It lasted about an hour. It was recorded last fall in New York, and it marked the publication of Walter Isaacson's latest book, Leonardo da Vinci. Isaacson, of course, has written many biographies, Steve Jobs, Benjamin Franklin, Albert Einstein, others. On stage, he was being interviewed, but it really was a conversation by 2 guys, and the other guy's pretty sharp too, Neil deGrasse Tyson. And the thrust of the conversation, the reason for the book, was the fact that although we think of Da Vinci as an artist, he was as much a scientist as he was an artist. And the scientist in him let him do all sorts of experiments. He dissected human cadavers. That's where he learned so much about anatomy. That's why his paintings are so amazing. I encourage you to Google the interview, the conversation, Neil deGrasse Tyson, Walter Isaacson, you'll find it. Honestly, it would be a well-spent hour, but there's an amazing fact that I hadn't known, and you don't have to go to the Louvre. You can use a reproduction. I did it on my monitor because he knew the properties of eyes. And he knew how light reflected. If you start on one side of the Mona Lisa and move across to the other side, her eyes follow you. Try it. It works. All right, a couple points of trivia. I ran across an interview with the king of the Cowboys, Roy Rogers. He was on one of the late night shows, and yeah, that's obviously more than a couple years ago. He was talking about Trigger. Trigger was a beautiful horse, of course, and appeared in lots of movies with Roy and on the TV series. Oh, and this isn't the trivia, but while talking about Trigger, he said, horses have two brains. I've worked with horses. I never thought they were particularly smart, but I never heard anything about them having two brains. Anyway, he said Trigger was smart. He'd only have to show him something once or twice and he'd get it. But the brain part, he said, if he asked Trigger to do this from the left side, as per usual, it was great. If he did it from the right side, it was as though Trigger didn't know who he was. All right, the trivia. Roy Rogers did buy Trigger. His original name, though, was Golden Cloud. And he'd been in the movies before. He was with Roy. The Adventures of Robin Hood, Maid Marian, Olivia de Havilland. Guess whose horse? Yeah, she's sitting on Trigger. He wasn't Trigger yet. All right, the other bit of trivia, and I can't prove it and I couldn't corroborate it, but Roy Rogers' greatest pride about Trigger was he was housebroken. All right, what's upcoming? This week, today, March 26th, is Spinach Day. Tomorrow, more appealing, I think, is International Whiskey Day. Wednesday marks the 180th anniversary of when ice stopped the various rivers feeding it. And because it was blocked, they stopped feeding it. And as a result of that, Niagara Falls stopped falling. Saturday, in addition to being the last day of March, and there'll be two games comprised by the NCAA Final Four, the Men's Hoops Championship, it's also Eiffel Tower Day. Major League Baseball starts this week. And Sunday, in addition to being April Fool's Day, it's Easter. And here's supreme irony. Every April 1st is not Easter, but every April 1st is April Fool's Day, and it is also Atheist Day and Easter. So, we'll be away for the holiday. So I'd like to mention, too, that the following week, Saturday, April 7th, is also Beer Day. So we'll see you in 2 weeks. And the Masters starts April 5th, Thursday, runs through Sunday the 8th. These coming weeks are going to be pretty cool, and I hope for you they are the best 2 weeks you've ever had.